Call to order of a work session of the Goodyear City Council, 6 October 2008. All items listed are for discussion only, and we do have only one item, and no action can or will be taken. We have one council member who is not with us this evening. He's ill, and however recovering nicely, I believe. And Councilmember Souza should be home tomorrow or the next day. And for the meeting, we'll have to have a vote to excuse him, but not for the work session. Okay, we have one item on our agenda, and that's to receive an update regarding various city projects and their financial situation. And John Fischbach will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. What we hope to do tonight is give you a broad overview of the project financing update. And with that, we want to look at all the current major projects that the city's involved in and from a financial perspective. And we hope to be able to provide you with a big picture outlook over all of the projects. We hope to secondly see what effect the current unstable economy has on these and the other projects that we're working on. We hope to show you how we are financing each of the projects. We hope to determine if timing or phasing of any project should change based upon the city's financial situation. And we want to recommend a course of action that we believe is prudent and cautious for the council at this time. The key projects that we're going to address this evening are first the spring training infrastructure, the retail plaza, the art costs at the spring training complex. Secondly is the Sonoran Valley operations project. Thirdly is the city center. The other variables that we want to address that play a huge role in the financial perspective that we're operating under is first interest earnings, the local government investment pool, which will be referred to as LGIP, the sales tax trends that we are experiencing in the city of Goodyear, assessed valuation, and the state's budget problems. The funding sources that the city has available for it are several. First is ongoing operating funds. Secondly is one-time operating funds, which we never want to use for ongoing operating if possible. Thirdly is letters of credit. Fourth are other financing tools. General obligation bonds, which we refer to as GO bonds. PIC bonds, which are Public Improvement Corporation bonds. And COP, which is certificates of participation. First, on the spring training project, the cost variables are shown on the screen. We have outstanding infrastructure costs of approximately, these are all rounded off, approximately $25 million in total costs left to do. We have $6 million that are totally city's responsibility. It's always been our obligation. They're budgeted. There's no problem with those. We have $19 million which are in the private sector. Those are the Civica and the Wood family obligation, but we took over those contracts a month and a half ago. And they're being paid for by a letter of credit from M&I Bank, and the money is in the bank, and we draw it down as it is necessary to pay bills, and the Wood family repays the bank. So that money is in the bank under the city control. What it adds up to is $0 in new obligations to the city. On the other side of the ledger, we have other outstanding private sector costs taken over by the city. Under that category, we have the retail liners and the plaza and the art. That's going to cost $3.6 million to complete. We have under that available to pay for it $1 million in a letter of credit. The question there is timing. We will have to wait to get that, but we will get it. It has different provisions for calling it than the other letter of credit that we had, so we can't just say, hey, give us the money, and they give it to us. So the net effect is the $2.6 million that is going to be necessary for the city to cover over a short period of time. Spring training funding for the $3.6 million in the private sector obligations, we have reviewed the flexibility in the CIP. The CIP totals approximately $103 million this year without the ballpark and the McDowell Improvement District. All but $1.8 million of that is already contractually obligated. We also considered tapping the $20 million reserve. The economy could worsen, as we saw in the stock market today, and we're saving for a critical rainy day needs, and that is something that we don't know yet if we've had a storm or not. But it is something that is on our mind and something that we have to very carefully prepare ourselves for. We recommend expanding the second PIC bond, which we're going to be financing for the Reds, and we're going to be bringing that to you on October 20th by $3.6 million. And that will pay for the $3.6 million in exposure that I referenced in the previous slide and allow us to complete all of that work, and it will be completed by the time that spring training opens this February. And the council will be voting on this on October 20th.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, John. Can I?
Sure.
You saying 3.6, but so we're not going to use the 1 million that you brought it down to the 2.6?
It's just a question of timing. We know that we don't have that money immediately available, so we have to borrow the 3.6. We'll have an extra million in effect over a period of time that we can either pay back bonds with or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
So the summary of that from the spring training standpoint is a $200,000 retail art plaza debt. And what that is designed to cover is the additional payments that we will have to make, and that's under ongoing in the operating budget. The Sonoran Valley. This is a major project that is being accomplished by the private sector. We currently have developers' annual costs to the city of roughly $2.5 million. That's what the developer pays to us for this period of 7 years, and he's a year and a couple months into that 7-year period. That covers basically fire service for $1.3 million. It covers the police contract. We have a contract with the sheriff, since we do not have officers down there, of $800,000. Streets contract of roughly $200,000, and an other operation cost of roughly $200,000. That's the total of $2.5 million annually that we are responsible for the 88 residents that live down in the Mobile area, and that will be something that the city has to do somehow or another. Future one-time considerations is the environmental impact statement. That statement, which is in progress right now, will cost us an additional $500,000 to complete. Once completed, it will be good for, we just found out today, approximately 5 years. And that enters into our decision as to how do we approach this and move forward or not. If we complete the EIS right now and the developer is able to finance the road and build it 4 years from now, we're great. If he's able to finance and build it 6 years from now, we might have a problem. We'd have to argue with the BLM about it. They said there are extenuating circumstances that can extend the life of the approval, but we're starting to look at those right now. The extension, Rob?
Is there a window by which they've dictated a completion time? I know in EIS processes, oftentimes they say from notice of intent. Some agencies want to see a completion within 36 months, so therefore we would have, say, 8 years. You know what I'm saying?
No, there isn't. I mean, they're responsible for it, so the window of completion is really in their hands. It won't be completed, it's my understanding, if we continue moving forward for at least another year and a half.
Okay, so 6.5 years
Yes.
from today.
Yes.
is what we're
Once the
talking.
notice, I think they call it notice of decision, is issued.
Notice of intent and then record of decision at
Yeah.
the end of the process.
That's when the 5 years start. The extension of the road obviously is the developer's obligation. The worst case scenario is that the development doesn't proceed at the rate expected. With today's economy, there's a huge question as to how rapidly it will proceed, and there are questions out there with Montage. We talk to them frequently, and it's a real question in their mind. Our recommendation to you is that we go ahead, even if the developer cannot come up with the $500,000, and we're still looking at that, but assuming that we can get that done for $500,000 and get the 6.5 years that Rob is talking about, it would seem to me to be prudent that we do that. But we're still looking at that. That is not a concrete recommendation to you yet. The construction of the road will obviously be built when the developer can pay for it. There's no way for the city to hurry that up. That road is estimated anywhere from $40 to $60 million to install the road. The operations, what we have to do is examine ways to absorb $1 million from last year. $1 million is currently unpaid. We bill them quarterly, so we bill them for work already done. They have not paid for the last fiscal year's last quarter, and they owe us approximately $1 million right now. It's only a month overdue. We have been in contact with them a couple times a week. They have said that they have submitted the bill to Weyerhaeuser Corporation. They believe that it will be paid, so that's where we stand on that. The $2.5 million, which we're about ready to send out the next quarterly bill for this fiscal year, is something that we also will likely have to absorb. So we need to take a look at that. So what we're doing is examining ways to reduce the operating costs that the city will have to experience. Okay, what this means for the funding sources for the additional financial obligations, we have the $200,000 up there under ongoing for the retail art debt for the spring training complex. We have the $2.5 million under ongoing expenses for the Sonoran Valley, and the $1.0 million under one-time expenses that we would have to recover from last year for the Sonoran Valley. $500,000, and as I said, this is not yet a recommendation, but $500,000 to pay for the EIS under one-time expenses. And there's zero under the letter of credit column because that is all taken care of with the ballpark. Other variables that affect us and keep us up at night. The city has budgeted $1.2 million in the general fund for interest earnings. We have $1.3 million maximum that could be lost citywide, not just the general fund, but citywide, by money that was invested with the state in the pooled funds when Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy. And those are invested with the state treasurer. The expected losses, according to the state treasurer for us, are approximately $350,000 to the general fund. We estimate, the state treasurer estimates, that we will have a 60% recovery of this interest. So we'll lose not up to $350,000, but we'll lose 40% of that. Other variables, as I said, that keep us up at night, the governor's required city contribution. As you know, she has imposed a $29 million voluntary assessment against all cities and counties in order to balance this year's budget. And the current estimated share for the city of Goodyear is approximately $350,000 of one-time money. Now, that is not a guarantee. We don't know what that's going to be because we can't get out of the state yet how they are going to calculate this formula. So it isn't done yet. And they are struggling with how to do it also. The League of Arizona Cities, as you all know, has advised us as member cities not to pay this bill if and when we get one. As the next item, not the next item, but the third one, the DPS crime labs, As you know, we got a bill from them, and we got an IGA from them for $160,000, which is down from roughly $851,000. And they got that down by applying grants to the funds. And so they lowered it this year only, though. So next year would presumably be up in the $800,000 range, because they're using all the money that they have available to them in order to soften the blow. State shared revenues are obviously a huge concern. They're budgeted for us at $4.1 million. And as the state goes economically with sales tax collections, so do we go. We have no idea yet where that is, but if you read the newspaper, you see that the state's been down 10% a month ago and 11.1% this last month. So we're assuming that we're going to get a hit there, but it's too early to tell. And then this uncertain economic conditions, which range from the current state budget estimates of $350 million to $800 million in the whole deficit. And the governor has sent out a letter to all the cities and to all her department heads saying, here's how we're going to pay for it. And she has identified all cash reserves in all the state funds that she is proposing to sweep into the budget. And some of those affect us. We don't know yet what the legislature will do or what the impact on cities will be. But some of those we have to keep watching. Based on the first 2 months, if our development continues at the present pace, we will be short $6 million in the Community Development Fund from development fees. We are projected to collect $6 million, so roughly half. We anticipate, however, being made whole because the mall is scheduled to come in the next few months. And so we have to watch that very carefully. The commercial has kept our sales taxes up, as you'll see in a moment, but the other sales taxes are down. So commercial development is still hot and heavy in this town. We're opening about 2.4 million square feet of new retail space over the past 3 weeks to the next 2 months, and that's certainly going to have a positive impact on the city of Goodyear. So where does that leave us? Again, we have the $200,000 in the retail art debt. We have $2.5 million of one-time money, ongoing money in the Sonoran Valley, and $1 million in the one-time money. We have $500,000 in the one-time money for the Sonoran Valley. We have $350,000 in the LGIP set aside that we are likely to lose, or not lose, but likely to have to pay out, and then we'll get some of it back. State budget, we have $350,000 of one-time money, but that could be a lot worse next year, and $160,000 one-time money in the DPS crime lab, and $0 in the letter of credit for the spring training complex. City sales tax trends. One of the most robust parts of the city's budget obviously has been the sales taxes over the past few years. We collect sales taxes in 4 broad categories. We have restaurants and bars, hotels, retail, and construction. This shows the sales taxes, the total sales taxes, all of them together. You can see in July 2009 was up, fiscal year 2009, was up a little bit over 2008, but we were down rather substantially for 2007. August, you'll see that we were down relatively substantially for 2009, and 2008 was up over 2007. So we're anticipating September's figures right now. And quite frankly, with the stock market doing what it's doing, I don't see us getting huge increases. I don't see us really recovering from this until things settle down on the national scale. If you look at the bottom, I know the screen's too small to see those, but in the handouts that the City Council has, you'll see the numbers, and we have $46 million budgeted over the year 2007, or actually received in 2007. In 2008, we received $40.3 million. What we have budgeted for this year is $39 million. So we have, these numbers don't appear on this.
Oh, I was gonna
It
say,
adds-
I thought you
because
said
it
it was on.
that you said-
It adds up the numbers across,
Oh, okay,
so
thank you.
that's what they add up to.
What was 07
Can you give
again?
them the numbers again?
07 is $46 million. 08 is $40.3 million. Those are actual receipts, those two. And the 09 budget is $39 million. So as you can see, we've conservatively budgeted for the future, and I think it's very wise that we have done that. Construction sales tax, which is a big number for the city of Goodyear. As you can see, July was a good 2009 year as compared to 2008, but only roughly a little more than halfway for 2007. And then in August, it went down rather substantially. And so, construction sales taxes are a big question mark right now. This will come into play when the mall comes in to take their permits out, and we anticipate that will be in a couple months. Harkins theaters have already filed for their permits, so the work and the procedures are moving forward. So that's the encouraging news. Retail sales are sort of hanging on. As you can see in July, they're down a little bit for 09 as compared to 08. They're down rather substantially from 07. But then in August, they're down just a little bit again from 08 and 07. And this one we anticipate will take a rather healthy jump up in 2 months from now. And that's when we will receive the receipts, the first receipts for the stores that are opening right now. And as I mentioned, we have 2.4 million square feet of stores that are opening over the past 3 weeks and over the next 2 months. And that's 1 million plus square feet at the Canyon Town Center, or Canyon Trails Town Center. And it's also roughly 1 million square feet up at the Power Center next to the mall, which has been open. I stopped and shopped at Home Goods next to TJ Maxx a couple Sundays ago. It was incredible, the crowds that were there. And they were also crowds at the checkout counter, which meant they were opening up their pocketbooks, which was certainly encouraging. Hotel sales tax, we think this is an anomaly that it's gone down so much. And by that I mean that we think somebody has misreported, but this is what the figures show, that we have collected about half of what we collected in 08 for last month. The month before was up a little bit over 07. So that one remains to be seen. If that recovers substantially this next month, it will prove that it was a mistake. So we don't know about that one. Restaurant sales are down, which is a little surprising because usually restaurants go up during uncertain economic times. But right now they're down a little. As you can see, the 09 column shows a slight, more than a slight, but a decrease in July and a less of a decrease in August. We also have a bunch of new restaurants that will be opening over the next few months, so hopefully that will provide some additional income to the city from those features. City sales tax trends. We will present this information to you again in November, and that's where we are trending, and those figures will be a little more accurate as we get into the fiscal year. We're only 2 months into this fiscal year, so it's difficult for us to take these figures and do projections, especially with the uncertain economic times right now. But in November, we'll have a slightly different picture of what's happening, and we will present information to you at that time. The most reliable sales tax information will be March of 09. And at that time, we will have all of the new stores in place collecting sales taxes, and we will have the December and January holiday sales. And so that could or could not be significant and show significant improvement. Right now, we're assuming that the sales tax, since we did very conservatively budget this, will track with the conservative estimates, so we are anticipating very little effect on the current budget. We do, however, as you all know, we have told the employees that we would be looking at an increase depending on sales taxes after January 1st. Right now, it's too early to tell how that's going. It doesn't look promising, but we are continuing to monitor that, and we'll continue to look at that as time goes on. The City Center. City Center is a $67 million CIP project. That's not the total CIP, as I mentioned earlier. Our CIP this year is $103 million, but in the CIP we have $67 million for the City Center project. Estimated variables that cause us to watch carefully: the assessed valuation. This depends an awful lot on the size of the bond and the timing of the bond. If our assessed value goes down, obviously you can't float as large a bond, and so we have to very carefully look at that. And development impact fees. We currently have collected already $7.6 million of the $9.8 million that we show in the next chart. And these are impact fees already in hand that will pay for our design, our engineering, and stuff like that. If I could just, and I know I apologize for the size of this for those in the audience, but you'll see geo bonds and buildings. In 2009 and 2010, we calculate conservatively that we will be able to float $40 million worth of bonds. And in fiscal year 2010, 2011, we estimate that we will be able to place an additional $5 million in bonds for $45 million total. Geo bonds for the infrastructure, we delay until 2011 and 2012 when it will be an additional $5 million available. And then in 2012 and 2013, we will do an additional $5 million for $10 million, so that's $55 million. Development impact fees, the $4.2 million we have in the bank already. In fact, the $4.2 million, the $2.6 million, and the $1.4 million are already in hand. Well, not quite, that's 7.6, but they're almost in hand. So it's safe to say that we do have the money to go into the first phase of the engineering and design for the city center. And it's coming totally from the impact fees, not from additional monies that the city has to come up with. And then in 2011 and 2012, we anticipate that we will have collected, and I think this is rather certain, we will have collected an additional $1.6 million for a total of the $9.8 million. The general fund, we tap for $2.1 million in 2010 and $100,000 in 2011 for $2.2 million, and that gives us the total budget of $67 million that we are going to be putting into City Center. The resulting City Center business points. We're using COP, which is the Certificates of Participation, for interim financing to accelerate the completion. So we're issuing certificates of completion, and then we'll bond the proceeds and take the proceeds and pay back the certificates after the bonds are sold in 2010 and so forth. September 2009 will be the groundbreaking for the City Center under the present timetable. The City Hall, therefore, has been moved back a couple of months, but will be completed in January of 2011. Now, we have put in, as you'll see next October 20th, I think it is, we have put in a new clause into the contract that allows the city unilaterally to exercise its right to a 36-month deferral of work. So that if we go through the year's design, and that would take us into September of '09, and then we say, hey, let's go, we would have 3 years after that date if, in whatever, 4 months later we say, whoa, the economy is really getting bad. We have the ability to defer any further actions on the part of Langford in order to develop the city center. So we have some safety cushion built in there. That is a new provision that we've added because of our concerns with the economic conditions, and that Langford agreed to it, and so that is in the final contract.
John?
Yes.
Does that just put them on hold? I mean, do they just stop everything, what they're doing, when we ask for that additional time? I mean, it's just...
Yes.
Okay. And even if they have started doing some things out on the site?
I assume, Brian?
Yes, just to finish that out, we would, once we sign off on the GMP, the contract, then we're obligated, as John was pointing out. If they're doing work for us, we're only obligating to actually fund the soft side of things initially, so that'd be design engineering. So for the infrastructure construction, we wouldn't be doing that until we agree that we're going to go forward. If we agree to go forward, we still have 36 months to stop at any point along the way, whether they start infrastructure or not. But once we enter into contract, we're pretty well committed to the project. As John pointed out, we have until September of next year for the GMP. If we decide not to enter into that GMP, then we can walk away.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so in summary, this funding sources for the additional expenses, the additional financial obligations that we're facing. Operating budget, ongoing and one time. Under ongoing, you have the $200,000 under the retail, the art debt for the infrastructure, for the ballpark. We have the $2.5 million for the Sonoran Valley operations, and the $350,000 for the LGIP losses, some of which, 60%, we will recover. That totals $3.05 million of ongoing additional expenses. We have one-time expenses of $1 million for the Sonoran Valley, which is the $1 million that they are in arrears to us for, which they say will be paid, they hope, by Weyerhaeuser Corporation, and $500,000 if we choose to go forward with the EIS, and the $350,000 from the state budget, which they say we owe. Obviously, we're a long way from agreement on that with the league, but we have to factor this into any budget considerations that we're making, and the $160,000 for the DPS, the Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, for a total of $2.01 million that we are obligated or potentially obligated for of one-time expenses, and zero under the CIP and zero under the letter of credit. So what we have to do is figure out, okay, I asked Brian if this is a legal term or not. We have to suck up and figure out how can we do the budget and still move forward with the various projects that we have going. And Brian said, certainly it is. That was in 101. So, City Center recommendations. The City Center design is out of impact fees that are already been collected. Therefore, we feel that we should proceed as planned with the design, and that you, the council, should consider the contracts that we're bringing to you on October 20th favorably. The best option is we can build out on the current timetable. So we can be in a new city hall in January of 2011. The next option is that in September of 2009, we can exercise a 36-month clause, and then we can go immediately when the market recovers. And those are favorable factors in our estimation. So So the recommended course of action is proceed with city center design based on having the 36-month delay clause. And so we actually almost have 4 years from today in effect to delay that. Use the second PIC to complete the second Public Improvement Corporation bond to complete the private sector obligations. That's the $3.6 million for spring training. We can absorb that $200,000 additional in the operating expenses without too much difficulty. Continue the evaluation of cost-saving measures for Sonoran Valley. We are meeting with the police and the fire departments to determine how, if the worst-case scenario happens, how can we possibly cut those costs that we're incurring right now. And I appreciate some of the suggestions all of you have made to us, and we're looking at all of those in addition to the others that we may have available to us. Continue monitoring other revenues and expenses. As I mentioned, sales taxes are extremely important to the city of Goodyear, so we're taking a very close look at those on a monthly basis as they come in and how are we doing. And we will be giving financial updates to the council every quarter. That, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, is my presentation for this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I also have Brian and Larry available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. It's sobering, but we need this. Want to start which side? Councilmember Holland?
I kind of asked my questions. I went along there, but I mean, this sounds, in spite of being bleak, and I think all of us are being affected by this, including our own home budgets that we're looking at in our small businesses. There's really not very much that you can say when you're faced with the facts. It'll be interesting to see what happens from the state perspective and see where we end up, because that seems like that's a big point that we need to take into consideration. But John, you guys are doing great. Really, really pleased to be working with you, and some good ideas here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cavalier.
Yes, thank you. John, I appreciate the presentation. There was a lot of good information in this, and actually I thought it was going to be worse than what you presented, but it's still a little bleak. My question that I have first is, on this last slide, based on having the 36-month delay clause in the contract with City Center, does that mean we have, if we choose, we can delay this from 2000, for this, instead of being completed by 2011, it could be completed by 2013 or 12?
Is it 14 or 15? 14, 2014.
Oh, 14.
Yeah.
So that would give us more of a...
If we find that the economy keeps going down and we aren't capable of servicing the debt, then we don't need to place that debt, and we don't need to get into the position where we are obligated to pay that debt.
Okay, so, but we would be obligated up to 2000, say 14 or 15, whatever that is.
For any work that we're doing, yes, obviously, but we would not be recommending you to proceed if things haven't straightened out.
So we wouldn't have to proceed based
Correct.
on that.
Correct.
Okay. And then the point, what is this art?
Well, the art is $500,000.
Yeah.
That's for the baseball bat piece that's going in the plaza. And we have already received $200,000 from the Wood family. And so there's $300,000 left to spend on the art. The artist is fabricating the art piece, and so it will be in place in time for the opening day. But that's what the art is.
And that includes the...
The enhancements of the plaza?
Right.
No. That is a separate figure.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Clarify for me the short and you talked about. I wrote down 6 million short in community development, but I heard two different numbers or two the same numbers, and I think you were trying to share a difference there. Do you recall what you were saying?
What I was saying is that right now, the budget is $12 million.
Okay.
At the present trend, we're on track to collect $6 million.
Okay.
If, however, the mall comes in, which theoretically it will, because Harkins is already in, we will be able to meet the budget. We aren't anticipating any shortfall in that $12 million.
Okay. I wrote that down wrong. Thank you for the clarification. The question about the $19 million letter of credit that's sitting at M&I Bank.
It's sitting in our account.
It's sitting in our account.
Yes.
How does that play with, I mean, I know that if I have $100,000 under my Social Security number, the FDIC insures that, or, well, maybe it's $250, hopefully soon, right? But how do cities fare in that, given the banking industry right now? And yeah, I would have never thought to ask this question 3 years ago, but here we are sitting today. We've got a letter of credit that we're working off of, and what happens? What position are we in? Where?
That money is actually invested as we do our money is invested in the LGIP. That money is in there also. The general fund money that we keep in our checking account is required by law and is collateralized by deposits, but we try to keep that in the $2-3 million range. But it is collateralized by U.S. government securities. That's required, and our bank does provide that.
So we cashed that $19 million check and we put it in the LGIP?
That is correct.
So are we going to see any more pressure? I mean, I've watched my 401k cut in half in the last year. So are we going to see pressure of that magnitude on the LGIP? And is that something we should be concerned about on the local level?
We are analyzing the LGIP. However, the investments in the LGIP are generally on the debt side of the equation, not on the equity side of the equation. The Lehman Brothers is an example where they've analyzed their portfolio. That was debt of Lehman Brothers that, because of their bankruptcy, had to be looked at. So there is some corporate equity within that investment. That's correct. But that is all blended with the entire package.
And talk about, I mean, we have done better
Yes.
in the LGIP.
Yes. There are two
Well,
different.
it's been a good investment for us.
Yeah, there are two different pools in the LGIP. The pool that we're in does have some commercial paper in as part of it, investment grade. The other pool is simply the government securities. The State Treasurer's Office ran a calculation when this came up of the net returns for the past year if you had been in the one pool or in this pool net of that loss. And we were still better off in the pool that we were in, according to their calculations. As part of the analysis I described earlier, we will look into that closer, but that is because the higher yield you get for going into the corporate securities generates a higher yield, but you know, this loss was a total of 1.2% of the state's portfolio, so it was only a small portion.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it'd be nice to stay on top of that as you're giving us those quarterly updates and
That's for sure.
how much we're in there. And then, just as a follow-up, not an answer tonight, I'd like to hear in the next quarterly update or in between that time period where we're at on voter authorization on bonding capacity and what that might do, and also maybe a couple different scenarios of if assessments go down by 10 or 20 or 30% over the next year, what that does to our pressure and what categories, you know, obviously if we see a cut across the board in order to help people out financially on property taxes and the like, it's going to impact that.
We'll provide you a yellow paper on that. I can tell you just briefly off the top of my head that we estimated in the budget $1 billion assessed value. The county came in with $1 billion assessed value. We estimate for next year $850 million because of the decrease. They estimate that it'll be 900 million. So we're even more conservative than they are. They are coming down, but we are coming down more. So we're trying to be and that's what I mentioned earlier, we're trying to be very cautiously pessimistic in that area, and that includes a 20% reduction in residential is what we applied to it, and a 5% increase for commercial properties. So with all of the new construction that's taking place, we believe that's reasonable. But we will do a yellow paper on that, Mr.
Rob, can I
Antonio.
just ask you, were you asking for new bonding that we go out to voters, or were you asking
No,
for the
no.
bonding
No,
capacity
we've got
now
bonding
have?
capacity now, but if we
Our-
see
our
downward
present-
pressure on that assessed valuation, we're going to see downward pressure
Okay.
on that bonding capacity
Right.
too,
That clarifies.
which we make a lot of assumptions on. So. And then, I don't know, does anybody know off the top of their head, what was our shared revenues last year from the state?
4.1 million?
So they're asking us to give back an eighth of what they gave us last year? If you talk about 500,000
maybe.
between.
They may
So
ask
they're asking
more.
for 12.5%, but
The income tax is about 6.
Okay. The 4.1 is sales tax, the income tax is 6, so it's 10.1 million
Okay.
shared revenues.
so they're asking for about 5%. Okay. Just trying to put it in perspective. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Councilmember Osborne?
Okay. A couple questions. So are we, when Frank brought up about the art, are we contractually obligated to the baseball bird?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And the road, the study for EIS, what is the advantage to us if Montage can't pay for that road study? What is the advantage for us to do it? Because then we're obligated within 5 years, you're saying, to come up with 30 to 40 million to build that road. So why do we want to put ourselves in that position if they can't even afford
Yeah,
to pay?
and and that's what we're trying to analyze right now, Ms. Osborne. Is there any benefit if the city does undertake the $500,000 to complete the study? It would be in place, and we'd work hand in hand with Montage or whomever, and if they think and they believe that the economy would recover and that they could build the road. I'm not sure whether or not it will be a possibility, and that's why there's no recommendation with that. We're still analyzing it. I don't know if we will come back to you and recommend that we pay for that. We can pay for it with transportation funds. I mean, so it will not affect our general fund, but it obviously affects what we can spend in the city. So whether or not we continue to proceed with that is something that we still have to finish analyzing and will be your decision.
You mentioned in 09-10 that it would be 42 million of a bonding that we would use for the city center. What is the bond payment on that amount? What is going to be coming out of our general fund for that payment?
I don't remember. Sorry.
Okay, I'd like that.
We'll get that for you.
And if we were to take that 3-year postponement on city center, I'm in my cage, you can't touch me.
Did I look like I was threatening?
No, not at all. But if we did, I guess one of how does that then trickle down into the issue of the money that we've already should have spent for the library? Because we're already at 12 years when that money's supposed to have been spent at 10. We push it out 3 more years beyond that, then we're at 15. So what happens with that? I guess that would be the
All I
other-
can tell you right now is that, yes, we are at 12, and there is some flexibility how far we go.
I don't think it's that
The-
long, though. I don't
We've
think
looked
it's
at the
that long.
possibility, well, what if we just built the library, for example?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be,
And that is not, I mean, it is a possibility that, yes, you can build the library only, but you still have to put in all of the infrastructure. Because the library is going to be sitting back here, and you don't want to build infrastructure twice. So there'd be some additional costs there, but we are taking a look at that
looking at
also.
what that would be.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
Because I thought the library, we were extended as far out as we could on the library.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah, okay, just to clarify that. Well, I guess that our citizens should be happy that we do have that 20 million in reserve. And it's good to see your briefing. We're not having a government shutdown. We're still progressing. We're progressing cautiously, which I think is great. I do have a couple of concerns and one question that have we looked at Avondale and their 4-day week? Have we seen anything that saved the city any money? We've never heard how successful that program is, and I would like to have that information to see if that is another avenue that we could be looking at.
We'll get a yellow paper on that also. I did have breakfast with Charlie McClendon the other day, and he indicated that they were going to go to the council in the next few weeks to extend that trial period, because as you know, it's just an experiment right now,
Right.
to extend the trial period to make it permanent. He said that they had savings of, as I recall our breakfast conversation, it was $30,000 for electricity for the closure of the one day.
Right.
I am still concerned, as I've talked with many of you individually, I'm still concerned with service to the public. I think that that is our primary concern. Now, they have done surveys, and they said something like 84% of the people that are coming into City Hall say no problem. So I don't know yet, but
Well, you
we
know,
are
this-
taking a look at
This
that.
could be a trade-off, because I think to get us through these economic bad times, we're all going to make sacrifices, all of us. And so if time sacrifice on our citizens, I think that's, and if the citizens know that's why you're doing it, I think they'd be 100% behind you. The other thing that does concern me, and I think I've talked to you about this, John, but that delaying the city hall, which I understand. I mean, I want,
was teasing
you
you.
all know I want this built. You could get me off council if you build it right away. I wouldn't be on council. I keep staying on to get the building built. But I'm really concerned about the police department, because just recently I went through and took a tour, and they're crowded now. So they were supposed to stay in it 2 more years, and the space isn't even adequate for 2 more years. So now we're saying, okay, we're going to push it down further, so now what are we going to do with them? So I would like us to look realistically if Veneta, as an area in Veneta, we can expand and do the expansion early while it's available. But we do have a problem there, because they can't move into our building until we move out of it. So.
We'll sure take a look at that.
But all in all, I really want to thank staff and Larry and all of you. This is not easy to look at this and to work through all these problems we have, and I appreciate the hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, just a couple questions here, John. On the retail liner, was that an obligation of Civica?
Yes, Civica and the Wood family.
And do we have any rights legally to
We believe we do.
seek that 2.5 million?
2.1, and we believe we do, and we are pursuing those.
So that's, okay, that's, even though it's on here as 3, I think you had 3 or 2 or 3, you're still pursuing?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't get that, all right. On the EIS for road, and I think Tim will confirm this with me, we went through a long period to get BLM to agree to even do an EIS on that piece. I mean, I don't know how many, maybe years, at least a year, and now 2 years just to start. And then, and it took Pastor, me, and Mary Rose to go to a meeting with BLM, and Pastor was the key, to get them to move. If we stop this now, we're going to start that all over again. And that's something we need to think about. On the road, you said 40 to 60 million. Is it a wild idea just to say, why don't we throw down some blacktop and make it a public safety only road to get our police and fire down there as a low-cost measure initially?
We'll sure take a look at that. I don't know.
I think we need to be realistic with the employees. The chance of, to me, in view of this situation, of getting additional increase, Jeannie, is pretty slim, I'd say. We probably need to say that. City center buildings, does that include the library and the city hall?
Yes.
Nothing else?
No.
And the infrastructure?
Yes.
Okay, and then that PIC financing for the Reds, additional $3.6 million. You know, we talked about that before, that we had suggested a revenue source for that. We need to look at that again. It was for a couple $100,000, as I recall, a year, for raising that hotel tax by 1%, which would still put us about in the median. At least you need to present it again, I think. Just can't walk away from that. So, any other comments? Okay, you know what? How about, do you mind if we do this monthly, this sort of thing?
I think during this period of time,
We
it's
do need to do
probably-
it periodically.
I mean, we need to be able to act quickly on some things, I think, and we need an
Quarterly,
update.
you know.
Quarterly, I'll do it quarterly if you want, but I'd like to see it more often.
How about,
What?
No, or every 2 months.
Let me look at this.
We'll look at it.
If we're ready to come back with more information and an update, as I mentioned, November will be a better time, but the quarter isn't that far off. I mean, so.
But realize, we go to places like Wildflower, and people ask us questions about finances, and they don't say, well, I'll wait for your quarterly presentation. So we really need to be almost on a real-time basis on this subject.
What I will try to do is certainly give you an update as frequently as possible. Whether that's monthly or not, I don't know, but we will take a look at that, Mr. Mayor.
That's fair, that's fair.
Just maybe an idea to further the mayor's is maybe there's 10 or 12 kind of indicators, financial health indicators that you could be sharing with us. I've really appreciated in your employee update that you've been indicating to the employees through that update where sales tax revenues are and where they're coming from, and even giving them, I get the sense that that's a real-time kind of litmus test coming from your office, and that you're looking at that within the last 72 hours or 5 days or 7 days, and you're letting the employees know. Maybe there's 10 or 12 of those that are healthy kind of financial indicators, and then a more comprehensive update on a quarterly basis would be appropriate.
Right, because some of these things won't change that
Yeah, I know.
often.
No, but we do need to be able to discuss
We
it,
do need to- yeah,
rather
we
than
need to
just
have an
get it at your
opportunity.
house and meet my house, and then we meet and
No,
talk
I-
about it later. We need to interchange,
Okay.
because we're talking policy changes.
Yep.
And important ones. It's really not too much that's more important than the subject right now.
That's
And you
correct.
could put those 10 or 12 indicators, and if we needed to
Yeah.
elaborate on an agenda, you could have it on the agenda all the time,
That'd be fine.
once a month.
Okay, by the way, it's a good presentation, and it's good to get the facts. So we thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Why don't we go for about 6:05
Okay?
for our meeting? Meeting's adjourned.